The mainstream media, when it's concerned with the United States, has been mostly preoccupied with the inauguration of Donald Trump and the fires in Los Angeles. But along with what's been out of the main media is a story that has been pretty big on the alternative media, particularly a program called News Nation. I want to speak a little bit about this. From late December, it was made known that there would be definite disclosure beyond anything that had been revealed in the congressional hearings on unidentified anomalous phenomena, as unidentified flying objects have come to be called, far more than in the two congressional hearings of 23 and 24. That before the inauguration of Donald Trump, there would be substantial disclosure. And this took place just a few days before that, in the form of a long interview, 2.5 hours actually, with a former military man called Jacob Barber. It's on News Nation in the form of a sort of documentary with music and a fair amount of hype. But thankfully the full 2.5 hour interview is now available. I'll give you a quote from Jacob Barber, an interesting guy. "The skies are not classified, and our conscience cannot be redacted." He is a very together guy, as will be clear if you get to look at either the News Nation report or the full interview. Now, I want to speak to this unfolding situation. Now, if something is my personal belief, then I will say so. But if there's enough public domain evidence out there, I won't take up the time saying it is alleged. So, making that clear. Another thing, a disclaimer before we go too much further, I don't believe there's much good in looking for simple three-dimensional answers that fit the physics we learnt at school. The maths of string theory, which I don't pretend to understand, but I'm told it works with 11 dimensions. And if you want a book on trans-dimensional physics, then you can find plenty of them on Amazon. Now, the main substance of what Jacob Barber disclosed could be summarised as: we are not alone on planet Earth. There is substantial activity by non-human intelligences. The second thing, in all the major powers of the Earth, there are transnational programs interacting with non-human intelligences and using their technology obtained by various means, peaceful and not so peaceful. And the third thing, altered states of consciousness are involved in engaging with and in controlling unidentified anomalous phenomena and non-human intelligences. I'd like to read a quote from the interview. "We need to know that we're not alone. We need to know that there's a profound spiritual component to our existence, and that's just for the sake of our own fellowship as creatures sharing this planet. But also, there's an extreme amount of utility in our ability that has been suppressed forever." Now that's throwing down a bit of a spiritual gauntlet, isn't it? A lot to unpack there. but I'll leave it for you to do that if you haven't already seen the full interview, or if what I'm saying causes you to wish to engage with it at your leisure. But one thing is for certain, this disclosure presents challenges, first of all, to materialistic scientific thinking. Here we have technology that goes way, way beyond what we can achieve with our disclosed science, and it involves altered states of consciousness at a profound level. And another challenge is to some widespread religious belief systems. Where does this fit in? Another quote now, which may well cause some consternation to certain people with certain belief systems. This is using the word psionic, Psionic. A psionic person is someone with the predisposition for extratemporal abilities and sensitivities. Someone who has a fantastic intuition. And he goes on to speak of the program with which he was involved, and there's plenty of visuals about this program. He says psionics were being used in the program. There was certainly a desire to explore the idea that perhaps unidentified anomalous phenomena could be summoned. Well, the thoughts of doing something like that, people with extratemporal abilities and sensitivities, certainly calls forth, and I've heard it from people I've spoken with, the response, oh, this is occult, this is New Age, this is demonic. Two people who have engaged with me in dialogue on this, I have said, well, what about divine healing? Assuming the person believes in divine healing, which I certainly do, for very good reasons. There is surely an instance of consciousness affecting the physical. Another thing that, if it wouldn't freak people out too much, that I would talk about would be gemstones. That in certain circumstances, sometimes in worship meetings, sometimes in very practical situations, gemstones appear. Where do they come from? I certainly have found them when no one could ever have put them. I didn't see them materializing, but my belief is that they come from another dimension. You can call that dimension heaven if you like. I'm just going to say my experience of gemstones is they just showed up. And so it seems do unidentified anomalous phenomena sometimes. They just show up from nowhere. Well, are UAPs demonic? For a start, there are plainly different kinds. Also, given some of the stuff that we have done to unidentified flying objects, as they were called in the past, downing them with such weapons as we had available, they could have destroyed us any time they wanted to, if they were so evil. Or maybe UAPs are somehow God's intervention. Well, I personally don't believe that, but I believe it is something that needs careful consideration. For example, if somebody says to me, okay, you believe in divine healing, what about the NHS? What about doctors? I would say, well, that's part of God as well. That's part of his provision. Well, what about UAPs being a bit like that? We believe in divine healing. We believe in angelic rescues. And we're grateful for them, but we also are grateful for the NHS. We're grateful for the emergency services. They're part of what, in God's provision, is there for us. Well, I see UAPs as being in that kind of category. Neither divine intervention nor demonic, but just part of what's there for us as those who walk planet Earth. I want to consider now two of the main ways in which non-human intelligences are being engaged with. Now the first, Jacob Barber goes into some detail about. He talks about psionic teams with US military training. Now, I was personally surprised at how far back that goes. It goes back to a thing called the Monroe Gateway Program. It started in 1958 with CIA funding. So it's been around for a long time, this idea of developing psionic abilities and using them for military or other purposes. To quote again, some are born with it and some undergo heavy training in these psionic teams. Well, I certainly couldn't be, if I wanted to, involved with any of those, but one that I could be, or you could be if you wanted to, is what is known as CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, which is where deliberately a group or an individual will seek to have contact with non-human intelligence. Now, it's based on meditation and openness to non-human intelligence technology being made available, things like free energy, non-polluting, sustainable energy for all. These basically are people of goodwill who believe and would provide visual evidence for being able to summon isn't perhaps the right word, to invite. I think invite is the word that they tend to use, to invite non-human intelligences to make contact. Now, I'm not criticising any of these groups, but I keep my distance from CE5, at the moment anyway. As a committed Christian, I'm open to engaging with non-human intelligences. I see that as part of being committed to truth, part of wanting to see the benefits that could be obtained for the world, made available through non-human intelligence technology. And part of it is my own experience, that I was asked a couple of months ago to write a piece for a discussion group in North Wales that I was part of when I was living in Wales. And I thought, I'm going to write it about orbs because they're in the news. You may have seen pictures of the orb at Manchester Airport. And I certainly included a picture of that in my piece. But I thought, well, this is Wales, and I knew that during the 1904-05 Welsh revival that there were unidentified anomalous phenomena, lights in the sky, that were unaccountable. So I did a bit of looking into it, and I came across an account in a newspaper of the day of a preacher of the Welsh revival, Mary Jones, in her carriage coming back from a preaching trip in the Rhondda. And she writes about how she doesn't call it an orb, but she says a bright light came into her carriage and settled harmlessly. She didn't say what happened afterwards to it. When I read that, I really jumped, because during lockdown, this is 2021 I think, I was living on the Isle of Sheppey, and it was lockdown. You're allowed one outing a day. One morning I woke up really early and thought, hey, I'm going out to have a time of worship, a noisy time out, and watch the sun come up. So out I went, and I was engaged in worship, and I was deep into that worship, and I looked up and I saw this light, and I thought, hey, that's not Venus. That wasn't there before. And it started coming towards me, and I had time to take out my camera and take a picture of it, and I must have touched the video because I've even got a video of it. And it came and it settled down beside me, and then it just went straight into the ground. I didn't think a lot of it at the time, but interestingly, that kind of phenomenon sought out a preacher in the Welsh Revival, and it sought out this old guy as he was out having his time of worship. So I believe that there are beings who want to know the spiritual story of planet Earth. In the New Testament, in the first letter of Peter, we read that angels desire to look into the things that have to do with the good news of Jesus. Charles Wesley, in his great hymn, "And Can It Be?", writes, "In vain the firstborn seraph tries to sound the depths of love divine. 'Tis mystery all, let earth adore, let angel minds inquire no more." Now my question is, how ready are the sons and daughters, especially those who are open to the supernatural side of the good news of Jesus Christ, how ready are we to engage with interdimensional beings that maybe want to know, and to let them know, or let the good news be made known in the cosmos? Are we up for that? And if we are, how can we do that together? And on a more technical note, what can we, as voters and citizens and people of goodwill, do to enable non-human intelligence technology to be made available worldwide? Whatever the oil multinationals and the energy barons think about it, what can we do? There's going to be more disclosure as 2025 unfolds. How will you feel about it? What will you do? Thank you for listening today, and God bless you.